I'm Beth Feldman Brant. I'm an audio describer and a poet.
Hi, I'm Charmaine Parrish. I'm an audio description coach and an accessibility advocate.
And you're listening to
White Canes Connect.
Hey there, PA Federationists. Welcome to another episode of White Canes Connect, presented by the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. My name is David Goldstein. I am the first vice president of the affiliate. Joining me today is White Canes Connect contributor, Simon Bonenfant. Simon, what do we have on tap today?
Today, we will be speaking with Beth Feldman Brant and Charmaine Parrish, and they are talking about new audio descriptions at Bartram's Garden, a garden located in Southwest Philadelphia, which will be debuting on Saturday, April 19th at their SpringFest from 11 o'clock to 3 p.m. And the audio description portion will be at 12:30 p.m. And these are recorded audio descriptions of 3 of their gardens. There's also a welcoming orientation description as well. And Beth is the audio describer and Charmaine is the coach. And as I mentioned in the interview, you may be familiar with them from hearing their names when we did the podcast about the Audio Description Learning Network, because that's how we all met with that fellowship, and that's how Beth started audio describing. And so we take you through what it was like to create the descriptions, the vivid sensory detail that is present. And we hope that you will come out to Bartram's Garden. It should be a nice day weather-wise. You can meet members of the blindness community. And they also would like to hear your feedback about what worked, what things you would like to see improved in the descriptions. And they may go back and re-record some parts if they feel that the feedback really warrants that. So they really would like to hear from you and for you to enjoy the elements that they prepared.
Here's a small sample of what they'll be offering.
This garden was restored to echo its historic past in 2016 using archival photographs and documents. The foundation of this garden is more than 30 varieties of heirloom roses, which highlight roses from the period between 1820 to 1850 and roses that were important to the history of rose breeding. The rose collection is spread throughout the garden and features varieties with different colors, bloom times, and scents. For example, while strolling the path, you will come across the Carolina rose, a low shrub that grows 1 to 3 feet high, with thorny stems and a 2-inch wide, 5-petaled light pink flower around a yellow center. There is the old blush rose, one of the oldest and strongest in the world, which boasts abundant blooms with concentric circles of loose, silvery pink petals and grows 5 to 6 feet tall. Its scent resembles a sweet pea. The Isabella Sprunt rose, growing 2 to 3 feet tall, is a very pale yellow with a round globe of petals and a strong fragrance. In addition to the roses, this garden features heavenly or sacred bamboo. This evergreen shrub boasts a profusion of tiny white flowers in the spring, followed by clusters of green berries that turn and stay red throughout the fall and winter.
So that is just a small sampling of what you can get. And Simon, there is nothing better than walking around outside in a beautiful garden on a beautiful day. It should be a great time to get out and about. And one thing that we all love to do is get out and about.
Oh, yes. And the great thing about this is that you can go anytime you want. After the 19th, these will be up on the website. You can bring your phone, you can take your headset, and you can access these recordings.
Let's get to the interview. This sounds great.
Well, Beth and Charmaine, it's wonderful to be speaking with you today. Thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you both doing today?
Doing all right. Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Simon.
Well, some of our listeners may be familiar with your names, although not your voices yet. but they may be familiar with your names through a podcast that I hosted back now in January of 2024, talking about the Audio Description Learning Network. And that's how we all connected. And we're going to be talking a lot about audio description today with a very exciting project. But before we get to that, it's been a while since we've talked about the ADLN and some things that have been going on. And we have some very exciting news that may be of interest to many of our listeners. I am one of the administrators of the Audio Description Learning Network. And for the past several months, I have begun to create a curated list, a monthly curated list of all of the audio described events that will be happening that month in the Philadelphia area. And we would love to get listeners who are interested in audio description and interested to learn about what's coming up in our region to be on that list. If you are interested in signing up to receive the audio description announcements, send an email to adlearningnetwork@gmail.com, and you will receive the email coming up in April with the next month's list of audio description events, which will include what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about an audio description debut at Bartram's Garden, which will be happening on Saturday, April 19th, in conjunction with their SpringFest. Beth Brant is the audio describer who developed these wonderful audio descriptions that we're going to be talking about today. And Charmaine, you coached Beth in this process and used your wonderful expertise as being a visually impaired coach in the process. So it's a great partnership that you both have. Beth, can you start by telling us how this came about?
I was part of the Audio Description Learning Network. I was one of the first fellows to learn to describe live theater, and that's how I met you, Simon, and Charmaine, who are both our coaches. And an opportunity came up to apply for what's called the inaugural Sewing Excellence Awards, and it was from the IDEA Center for Public Gardens and the United States Botanic Garden. And the idea was to make gardens more accessible. So I applied to kind of learn on the job to audio describe gardens. And I did one project with the Chicago Botanic Garden and some coaches out there. And the project we're going to talk about today at Bartram's Garden with Charmaine as my partner and my coach.
Can you start by telling us, for those who are not familiar, where is Bartram's Garden? And give us an overview of what people can expect if they've never been there.
So, Charmaine, you're in the neighborhood. It's in Southwest Philadelphia. It's right on the river. It's a historic garden of the Bartram family, who are considered America's first botanists. And now it's a community gathering place to just be sort of out in nature in the city. And Charmaine, you grew up there, right?
I didn't grow up there, but I grew up going there. My grandparents lived in Southwest Philadelphia for the majority of my childhood. And so whenever I would visit them, more often than not, we would pop on over to Bartram's Garden because the admission has always been free. And so it was just like the neighborhood park, but 100 times better. And so we would walk the trails, we would go down to the river. It was just one of the places that I associate with my grandparents and with my childhood. It was always a part of my life.
So Beth, can you tell us about how this came to be? I know it came about through a grant. And how were you first involved in this project?
I had been lucky to be one of the fellows to learn about describing live theater. And when the opportunity came to describe gardens, it kind of meshed with other work that I had done as a poet, including a big visual art project I did with Claire Owen, who's a Philly visual artist, and Bartram's, where I really we actually wound up creating a whole book of poetry and visual images about Bartram. So I was really embedded in the story and their history and the place. It just felt to me like another tool in my toolbox if I could learn to describe gardens. And describing gardens in public spaces and outdoor spaces is really different than describing live theater.
So you approached Charmaine about this project and you started working together.
Right.
What were some of the considerations that you had to think about? I know that in listening to the recordings, Beth, your poetry really comes across in some of the way you give the descriptions. You use some metaphors, some comparisons. You really do a nice job of equating the outdoor setting to other parts of life that our blind and visually impaired audience, and really anyone, would be familiar with in their daily life. And I think that just helps give a greater understanding of the setting and how people can best interact with that. So, can you both give us a high level overview of how the process worked, how long it took, and will your talents both shined in the creation?
We hit a really good point because the Bartram's Garden was reinterpreting and coming up with a new take on what tours for the gardens were going to be. So they were already thinking about this. And so I actually met first with the curatorial consultant to try and say, okay, what are the stories you're going to tell? Where could we do descriptions? And so then Charmaine and I went together. Maybe you want to talk about that, Charmaine. And we kind of found out, that like nothing about us without us saying that a lot of the things that we thought would be great places to describe once we walked around with Charmaine really weren't. And you can speak to that a little. That was kind of an interesting
Absolutely. It was
hour.
interesting for sure, comical a little bit. But we definitely adapted afterwards. Just walking the grounds as a visually impaired person, noticing the different changes in what the ground, like the different types of terrain we had to walk across to get anywhere, and how frequently it changed. And looking around and trying to figure out how we would navigate to certain spaces that did not have any landmarks around it. So there was one place that I really wanted us to describe, and it was this bench that's in the middle of a field. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we could say turn left at or, walk towards or look for, anything like that. So also, in that same area, as we're walking down this trail with these big rocks that are different at varying levels. So you had to be careful for that. Also, the length of the walkway from the house all the way down to the river is a quarter mile. And, depending on, who's going to be in the group with us, they may or may not want to sign up for that long travel. Not to mention getting to the end of the trail. And the closer we're getting to the end of the trail, I am not feeling very safe because I can see with my limited vision that while there is a wooden fence that goes along the river, the path at the section right at the end of the trail has nothing. There's no barrier between you, the big rocks, and the river. And so I had to bring that to everybody's attention just because it was one of the places that, we were thinking of coming down there because, again, like Beth mentioned earlier, that was the entryway into this jewel on the hill. And so we had to come up with a different way to showcase things because that just wouldn't work for people traveling by themselves. Again, if you are traveling with someone, with a sighted companion, then I wouldn't be as concerned about it.
And from there, as you say, we just were like, okay, this isn't safe. We're trying to design this as if someone with limited sight or no sight could come by themselves. So we kind of went back to the visitor center and said, okay, what is safe? And it turned out that we could do a sort of know before you go. How do you navigate from the parking lot to the visitor center? And then in a very relatively short distance was a beautiful flower garden that had a story, the historic house that had a lot of stories, and sort of a common garden where they planted all the time. And it actually made sort of a square, and you came back out onto the main path. And just from that little bit of conversation, it highlighted to me things that I'd started to learn on the Chicago project, which is what are the cues that my first priority had to be what's safe. Where can people navigate? What can they navigate by? Is there something different under their feet? When it changes from this to this, you're almost at the garden. You're going to hear a train that's on the right sometimes. And so is there sound? Is there something underfoot? Exactly how far are things? Because if people don't feel safe, it's not going to be a good experience. So that was the first thing, obviously really different than live theater.
And building upon that, we knew, like Beth will tell you, I must have used the term sensory experience 100 times throughout us going back and forth as we're working on the scripts for these descriptions, because I wanted like completely immersive. So in order to do that, we need to take these other four senses and magnify them as much as we can so that you feel like you're a part of things. So that's what we came in. And again, like Beth said, it's significantly different than live theater in so many different ways. But I think we came out with a great product at the end.
Yes. And from listening to the recordings, these sensory experiences are very, very complete. And I mean, I've never been to Bartram's Garden. That's going to change soon. But just listening to the recordings, I could picture myself there. I could picture myself smelling the roses and feeling the oak tree and just feeling the flowers. You talk about how they feel and the texture and what's underfoot. And, when you come there on a nice day and all the elements of being outside, those elements really shine throughout listening to the recordings. So, how did you come up with that sense, Beth, of doing the navigational elements? I know when I talk to people a lot of how they get to being confident with that is doing it and doing it a lot with a variety of different circumstances to get them to that. But when you are designing an audio description like this, you have to keep in mind any number of people's skill levels and people's level of safety and mobility. And if they're by themselves, if they're with someone else, things like that all have to go into consideration. So how did you prepare for that? And how long did that process take?
I was really lucky in that the first project I did was with the Chicago Botanic Garden. And out there, my coaches were from a group called Second Sense that helps people stay independent as they lose their vision. And when I was connected with them and I was talking to their community outreach person, who's a low vision person who uses a guide dog, and she said, what you really need is the orientation and navigation coach. And I was like, good. I don't know what that is. And she said, oh, we have one. And so when we were designing the tour out there, I was working with a woman who helps people learn to use either a white cane or a guide dog. And so that's really where I learned, like, what's underfoot matters. A funny story in Chicago is there's this big lake. It's a very different, imagine a very big botanic garden, kind of like Longwood Gardens here in Philadelphia. And there's this fountain. And we thought, oh, great. As people walk, you're going to hear the fountain to your right, and you can use that to navigate. And we knew it wasn't all there all year round. But when we went to test it with people, they had already dismantled it and put it away for the winter. And one of the people who were blind said, I'm navigating by the traffic. And which I hadn't even noticed, but it abuts onto like an expressway on the left. And so that was something where I'm thinking, well, there always is going to be traffic there. It's not like the fountain that's going to come and go. And so we use that sound to orient. Similar here, it's not all the time, but there actually is a freight train that periodically goes by Bartram's. And if you hear that, you can orient yourself. And since each of the three spaces that we were describing had good stories, had sense, in the roses, the way you walk around the house, you can actually feel how big the stone blocks were that John Bartram built this house. One of the really cool stories is there's sort of a porch, but it wasn't really safe to go on the porch because there's no railing on the porch and there are steps without anything on the sides. So we had to keep people on the ground to be safe. But you can feel on the porch that there are these three pillars, and you're feeling the bases of these pillars that are 2 stories high. But Bartram got better at making them as he went along. So if you feel the first one, it's kind of bumpy and square and whatever. And then as you move from one end to the other, they get smoother. There are all these things that you actually can feel. Charmaine, as you would say, you can feel the story. You can make the story out of it. And I think in addition to the sensory experience, Charmaine, that's what you really put in my head, which is sighted people have all these things to take in to make their own story. And that's something, Charmaine, you really talked to me about figuring that out.
Who doesn't love a great story?
Yes, it really is a story. And one of the things I was talking with you both about before we started recording is the fact that I love the way that the descriptions coincide with the story of, again, how the Bartram's house was built and just so many different historical contexts that are put throughout the 3 gardens that are described. And I had asked about how would sighted people know this? And it seems that we have a little bit of an advantage by listening to these recordings because we are able to get that historical background and context that you might not know visually just walking through the garden with no other context. So I was sharing that I've had that experience as well throughout different cultural sites that I've been to where I could tell people, oh, did you know this fact happened? And people don't know about that. And I know it because of the audio description. So it really does a great job of telling that story. And I think that's what all of art is, right? It's a story.
That's right.
What were some of the considerations that the staff at the venue had to think about? I'm sure that it was an education opportunity for them as well. Can you talk about the partnership with the staff there?
We worked, as I said, we worked with the curatorial team. We worked with the sort of community outreach person. We talked to, the day we were there were gardeners there. And so that's what we really needed, because since we were recording this in the late fall, because it was just the amount of time we had to do this grant, we could say to them, like, what gets planted here, and they were like, well, this is where all the tulips are. When the tulips are done, it has, these things are the same, these things change. You're also trying to capture across seasons, which is a little challenging. But once we explained to them what we were doing, for example, there's one plant that is used as an edging on the ground around the common garden that is called a sensitive plant. And it kind of looks like a fern, sort of a feather-shaped plant. And when you touch it, it curls up on itself, almost like it's hiding. And then if you leave it alone for a minute or two, it like pops back up. And so you would be able, if you're able to do that, to actually feel this plant on the ground, and you'll be able to feel it kind of contract from your touch and then come back. And that's something we wouldn't have gotten unless we had actually talked to the gardeners. And I think we did point out to them as they reinterpret the garden, I think there's this pull with historic organizations and places that have historic preservation status of how to navigate. How do you navigate a path? Well, yeah, it's the historic path, but it isn't safe. And I'm not the expert on this, but to say, I think, Charmaine, when they walked with you and they were like, yeah, there's nothing to tell you that there's steps. There's a big hole in the middle of this path. There's no handrail.
Yeah, it was eye-opening for them, and I'm glad
Absolutely.
they were there to experience it.
And I think I think we've hit them sort of at the beginning of their process, their learning process. And as you said, Charmaine, definitely eye-opening. They have now kind of prepped the Welcome Center staff before our event on April 19th to know that people are coming. I think by then there is going to be a big sign that'll have the QR code for the audio description. And anybody can use it, really. As you said, Simon, there's a lot in there that's just going to be interesting.
That's why I say all the time, access is for everyone. Everyone.
Yes, and it's a great learning experience that they had in this process. And you're right, the universal design element is really key. So let's talk about the event coming up on April 19th, because that will be an invitation for everyone to join. And there's going to be other activities there coinciding with the debut of the audio description. Can you give us the time and what people can expect on the 19th?
SpringFest is actually from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m.
There will be a lot going on, and that might be inviting for some people who want to come with your family and have things for everybody to do. There are going to be some other tours in the morning. So we planned our get-together for the afternoon, and I think the idea is we're going to gather around 12:30. At 1 o'clock, we're going to walk through the tour together. And so either playing it on a speaker on our phone, or if you have your own headsets, you can listen to it. And then we really want to invite anybody who would like to join us for some snacks and some community. And we want some feedback on the recordings. We kind of missed the weather window to test it with folks before we did the first set of recordings because it was late fall by then. So this is the chance for you to give us feedback. It's sort of like when the Chicago person said, no, I'm navigating by the traffic. I'm not navigating by the fountain. And so anything that we can tweak to make this more useful, we'd love if people could take another half an hour. I think we said, like 1:30 to 2 or something, to just meet each other and talk about their experience. We've put our event in the afternoon, but for folks who are listening, if having a lot of people around, maybe having music going, things like that are not going to be inviting to you, you actually can do this whenever, right? You can just listen to it on your phone when you go. And we might be planning another quieter event. We are planning it. We just don't have the date yet for people to come for whom a whole SpringFest might be a little overwhelming.
Yes, because there's going to be lots out there. A lot of people enjoying celebrating spring. People are going to be out enjoying. Hopefully we have some wonderful weather. So the community will definitely be out to celebrate the gardens, reopening.
I appreciated from the garden point of view, we actually talked about whether the festival was a good time to roll it out. And they're being very intentional to say, we want everybody to be welcome at whatever event we have. And so their decision or not decision, because we talked about it. They're like, if we want a spring festival, we want everybody to be able to come. So let's add the audio description into that. And then if people can always come another time, but they also didn't want people to feel like you're not welcome at the real event, you're welcome over here. And so what we're doing is to try and incorporate whoever wants to come to be able to enjoy this place. And then because it's available, that's another cool thing, different than live theater. You can only go on the day at the time that the audio described performance is happening. And this, you can come anytime and you can come multiple times.
Yes, absolutely. And I like what you mentioned about the community, because I would encourage people to bring their sighted family members, friends, colleagues. I would encourage people at the garden that are going to be there that day to experience what audio description is like. Anytime we can let people know about this service and get people engaged who don't necessarily need it for themselves, but are interested in it, I think that's a really win-win situation.
I think for the event, the website is Bartrams with an S, garden.org. And if you go to the visit section and plan your visit, that's where the audio descriptions are living. And if you go to events, you can sign up for the audio description part. And it's certainly not required to register, but it'll tell us, how many cookies to buy and give us an idea of how many people might be joining us.
Oh, very good. And we'll put all the information about that in the show notes, and you can contact Bartram's Garden from their website. If folks would like to contact you both about any kind of audio description project or anything that you might have in mind about what we talked about today, can they do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love talking to people about ways that they could make things accessible, finding places to go that are more accessible.
Well, can you give your contact information?
Oh, definitely. I'll give my name. Again, it's Charmaine Parrish. And they can email me at accessibility@able, ABLE, Philly, PHILLY.com.
And Beth?
You can find me on my website, and it's Brandtwords, BRANDT words.com. And there's an audio description page on my website in addition to my poetry work. You can actually look up the Bartram's poetry book that was called Solace. And there's a contact sheet, so you can reach out to me through that as well, just with an email.
Well, as we close our time today, is there any other things you'd like to mention as we close?
Beth and I interviewed each other, or we just had a chat about audio description, and that article will be published in the Southwest Globe Times on or around April 1st. So you could check it out on their website, which is swglobetimes.com, or you could, if you're in the Southwest Philadelphia area, it'll be on your doorstep because they send it out. This project was really fun. It's the first time that I've stepped outside of doing live theater coaching and ended up doing this outdoor space. And it was so much fun.
And I think for me, working on these projects, as you said, accessibility is for everybody. And it really is, it's a right. Having access to nature is a right. Having access to cultural experiences is your right. And so my role is to try and help people have the rights that they have. To me, accessibility really is an equity issue, and it's about let's give people some joy, go outside and feel safe and feel welcome and
live a full life.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's incredible. Yes, we all love nature. We all love to get out in the community because that's for everyone. Well, thank you very much for your time to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Beth and Charmaine for stopping by and giving us the information on the garden's audio tour. And Simon, they were part of the first annual award similar to what Simone Cooper has won.
Yes, that's correct. And I know that they actually connected with the Blind Social Club through that as well. But yes, there was a grant that made this possible. And I know that they're very thankful to them, as we are. I did want to mention, as well as I stated in the interview, that I am now an administrator of the Audio Description Learning Network, as well as the chairperson of the Accessibility Cohort of Greater Philadelphia. And the Audio Description Learning Network, recently, I have begun to develop a curated list of all of the audio described offerings for that upcoming month. And that is always released on the first of that month. So if you would like to get a copy of that and be on our mailing list, you can send an email to adlearningnetwork@gmail.com. That's our ADLN email address, and that will come to me, and you will be put on the list of audio described events in our area.
That is a great thing to do, Simon, and thank you for curating that list. And I'm guessing as time moves forward, that list is going to grow as far as both people on it as well as venues that are offering different audio described events. So that's great that it's happening, because that's one thing we all need, is to have some description on whether it's a museum or a play, or in this case, the gardens. Just a very exciting time.
Yes, and we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear about your experience with audio description. We'd like to hear about your experience with gardens specifically, and what you're looking forward to about this event, or any feedback you might have about the things we talked about at all.
Give us a call. You've got up to 3 minutes, 267-338-4495. 267-338-4495. Please leave your name and your town when leaving a message, and let us know whether it's something about audio description or if you've got other questions, comments, or show ideas.
You can send us an email at whitecanesconnect@gmail.com if you'd like to do that as well.
Simon, I look forward to getting out to the gardens and having a walk around on a beautiful day.
Yes, me as well. Thank you, David.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.